Hello and welcome to this week's BizSmart Lunch and Learn webinar. Our weekly webinars are aimed to provide advice and share knowledge amongst business owners. And if you'd like to keep up to date on our latest webinars, please make sure you follow us on SlideShare or subscribe to our YouTube channel. And you can access all of our resources for business owners by downloading the BizSmart app. Our host joining me today is BizSmart advisor and select member Jill Hutchinson from Aardvark Marketing. Thank you, Jill. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to have a little look at 10 tips that will improve your marketing. I'm not going to go through everything in a great deal of detail. A lot of these have other BizSmart webinars that you can look up and find a bit more detail anyway. So it's a little bit of a gallop, but I hope you'll find this helpful. Essentially, these are the tips that we find work best for small businesses working with tight marketing budgets but want to make an impact in their field. So I'll start with some fundamentals that most marketing agencies won't tell you. So the first one is that all marketing is optional. So if somebody tells you you have to do something, don't believe them, it's up to you. Secondly, if it doesn't increase your sales or your profit, don't do it. Marketing is about two things, about changing the beliefs of customers or potential customers and their behaviour. If nothing else is marketing, it is simply about what people know about you and what they do when they know that. And good marketing doesn't necessarily have to be expensive, and it doesn't necessarily have to be innovative. So one of the things that we think is quite important about marketing, the fifth thing, is changing the structure and your approach to your marketing. So taking some time to think, to understand what you should be doing with your marketing and what you're aiming to achieve before you dive into the doing. In my experience, most business owners tend to dive into the doing without really thinking about it first. So we think you should spend more time thinking and perhaps a little less time doing. So when you understand some of the key building blocks that I'm going to talk about today, you can then move on to what you actually do. Choose the right activities. Make sure you do each one of them well. Don't try and do too many. Do each one you do well, and it will work better for you. And then, so the Aardvark principle is we don't encourage anybody to sign up to anything expensive unless we're sure it's going to work. And there's no one size fits all because every business is different, so every marketing plan will be different. So, most of you have seen this before if you've watched some of my previous BizSmart webinars. These are what we call our marketing building blocks, and it's all about planning and measuring and then monitoring results after you've completed something and checking it against your next plan. And don't forget that most of this strategic thinking and help with that, the core improving your marketing strategy and planning, can be covered by grant funding if you're able to get some. So, tip number one is to start with the base of those building blocks, the things that everything else is dependent upon. And this is understanding who are your customers and what are their needs. So the more you can describe or put yourself in the shoes of your customers in terms of understanding who they are, where they are, what they do, what motivates them. If you can picture them in your head, what car they drive, where they live, what family they have, what TV programs they might enjoy, what radio they might listen to, the more you can do that, the more effective your marketing is going to be. And if you're looking at B2B and you're selling to other businesses, there are things that you should look about too. So understand those businesses. What part of their life cycle are they in? What industries are they in? Who owns them? Where are they in terms of geography? How profitable are they? How large are they? The more you can understand about your customers, the more you will understand how to communicate them in an effective way. And then everybody should be monitoring their typical customer behavior, because the likelihood is that more businesses, more customers will be found for your business that are similar to the customers you have already. So understand how frequently a typical customer buys from you, how much they typically spend, and whether they're loyal to you or whether they're shopping around. All these things are really important to understand. And then one more step with your customers is to check what their needs are. So people buy goods and services either because they're gaining something that they really desire and they want it, or they're trying to avoid something that's going to be painful and have some consequence for them that they don't want to go through. So there's a needs analysis that needs to be done. And then the final question, and perhaps the most important one, is why buy from you in particular? Why your business, and why not a competitor? So each of these tips I've divided into two things. One that you can do immediately. So my idea to try immediately on your customers is just go and ask a few why they buy from you. And think about how to reach them. What media do they consume? What do they go? What do they like? And then a follow-up action. These are things that are going to take perhaps a little bit more time or planning or a little bit of money to achieve. The follow-up action on your customers is to do something like a customer survey, which will sample your customer views after they've used your product or service. Or you can use something like a mystery shop, which actually samples customer viewpoints actually as they're using your product or service. So don't forget, if you're just talking to the first one, talking to a few customers, you won't have a representative sample, but they will give you some excellent feedback. A customer survey is stronger because it gives you more depth of numbers, and you can also do that independently. Sometimes customers will say something to someone like me who's a third party than they will say to your face. So sometimes it's worth having somebody else help in your survey for that reason. So our second top tip is your proposition and understanding your competitive advantage. So a positioning statement, which you should be looking at all the time you're in business, is thinking about who your customers are. So what are the target customers? So it's for certain people who have a particular problem, and then explain that your product is XYZ, whatever it is, that provides ABC, and then you can refer to your competition, saying, unlike our competitors who might do this, our product is different, and state your main differences. So that's what I call a positioning statement. I'd say it's likely that regular customers will lead you to other regular customers because they'll have similar needs and wants from you. And a follow-up action on your proposition is to do a full competitor review. So think, what are your direct competitors doing, and are there alternatives? And quite often in business, the alternative is to do nothing and just carry on and manage patching up whatever we're doing. So sometimes a do nothing is your worst competitor, rather than actually getting somebody to take some action to fix something you can help them with. And then if you're a BizSmart customer, you're on the BizSmart program, you will be looking at enhancing your product or service and anything you can do new, and whether those opportunities that you identify are scalable. So that's a great exercise to do, whether or not you're a BizSmart customer. Tip 3 is the really boring one. It's about planning. So simply knowing what you're doing with your marketing, when you want to do it, how much it's costing you, and what result you're expecting, and then sticking to the plan is the most effective marketing tool you can do. You don't have to do anything complicated. A simple Excel spreadsheet will be absolutely fine, just so long as you have a written plan. Don't just keep it in your head. Have a written plan, because then you can go back and review how you did against plan. There are more BizSmart webinars that I've recorded earlier on both marketing planning and a more detailed one on content marketing planning. So you may want to go and look at those webinars to give you some more ideas. So have a plan, stick to it. So build yourself something simple, calendar and budget. Have a monthly review. How's it going in terms of implementation, and what results are you getting? And then you can start tweaking that plan if it's not working for you, or if something's working particularly well, you might want to do more of it. Follow-up activities, if you're doing specific events, we would usually advise you to have a separate plan for that. So you can do marketing beforehand and you follow up afterwards. Have a separate content marketing plan if you're doing a lot of content marketing. A lot of businesses are blogging more frequently or doing video blogs. They should be done on a regular basis, so you might want a separate plan for your content and who approves it and who gets it out into the marketplace on your website and social media. And if you're doing multi-touch programs, these longer term warm-up programs, you will need a detailed plan for that. So you can have separate plans for different activities. Fourth top tip is to sit back and consider in detail your messaging. So addressing customer needs is really important. Most business owners, when you ask them, if you go networking and you meet a lot of business people and you don't know what they do and you ask them about it, they'll quite often tell you what they make or what service they do, and they very rarely talk about what customer need they satisfy. So it's much better if you can voice what you do in terms of how it helps customers. So focus on the customer benefits to make that message really relevant to them. And the what do I do, the call to action, make sure everything you do does have a call to action. And the more specific you make it, the more effective it's likely to be. So if you ask somebody either to pick up the phone and call you and give them the number, or look at a specific website page, a landing page, you're more likely to get results than if you miss that bit out. The other thing that's important with your message is to be consistent. Businesses, prospective customers of business get confused if we chop and change. So it's much better to have a consistent message and apply that, what you might think quite repetitively, but customers will come to it fresh. And don't forget, they're bombarded by marketing messages all the time. So they're unlikely to view it in the same way that you would. So our ideas on messaging is just to try 3 key messages and test them out. So test them out in a low-cost way. As a networking event you might go to, you can try it out on social media cost effectively, or you could discuss those ideas with 1 or 2 customers you really trust, and then update your communication from that. And don't forget, your message should refer to who you're talking to and what's their need and what belief or behavior change should result. So all messaging should have that. And the follow-up activity for this is your logo and branding. Make sure that your business, however small it is represented in a professional way. And that branding will give you some consistency as well. So make sure you use the same fonts, the same colours, you don't mess about with your logo. Certainly don't rebrand at every opportunity. That should be avoided at all costs if you can. Because, as I say, it can confuse your prospective customers. So that's messaging, that's tip 4. Tip 5 is to look at pricing. Successful businesses really try to avoid competing on price. They do that as a last resort. It's often very reactive, and it can lead to a nasty race to the bottom if one business cuts their prices and a competitor sees that and reacts and cuts theirs further, and then somebody else cuts theirs, and nobody really wins from that. You'll find on the Aardvark website a blog around pricing strategy and 4 different ways you can look at different pricing strategies and see how they'd work for you. But pricing is a strategic decision. It shouldn't be a reactive, let's reduce price when we panic, because price and quality are very closely linked in the customer's mind. So knee-jerk price promotions are definitely to be avoided unless you have to. It's quite interesting. I quite often watch the Apprentice TV show. The contestants are varyingly qualified to work in business, but when they're doing their tasks and they haven't had a lot of time to think about this and they're sort of thinking on their feet, they will usually drop a price when a customer's in front of them rather than thinking about adding value. But it's the adding value that creates the winning situation where they would make more profit at the end of the day. So that's my tips on pricing. Try not to panic over pricing. It will hit your profit very hard. Don't forget that customers will only buy on price if they don't foresee a difference between you and your competitors. So understanding what your proposition is really important here, so you don't have to do that. And trying to add value rather than reduce price. So just ideas to go away, which you can do fairly simply, is to test a price increase. A lot of business owners are frightened of price increases. I think it's going to drive away all their customers. And think about differentiated quality options and different prices, if that's the way around it. So you could have, for example, a bronze, silver or gold version of a product or a service. And keep an eye on those competitors. Don't react to them too much, but keep an eye on what they're doing in your marketplace. That's important. So tip number 6 is word of mouth marketing, because this is the most powerful form of marketing. People tend not to believe adverts. No matter how clever we craft adverts in our business, people will believe someone who's actually used your product and service and is happy to recommend you over an advert any day of the week. So the challenge of word of mouth is to try and influence it and make it work harder for you. A lot of small businesses do rely on word of mouth, but they complain that it's unpredictable. But there are things you can do to increase word of mouth success for your business. So here's our ideas. First of all, start with yourself as a business owner and think about what businesses you would recommend and what motivated you to go out and do that. And if you understand what motivates yourself to do it, you'll understand what motivates others to do it. Secondly, don't forget to ask for a testimonial. And quite often us Brits are a bit wary of asking for testimonials and recommendations. It doesn't come naturally to us. We're very reticent about it. But it's one of those situations where if you don't ask, you quite often don't get. So you have to sort of steel yourself to asking your regular customers to do that, or build it into some sort of review process to ask for testimonials to make it a bit easier for yourself. When you get them, you've probably got some lovely testimonials if you're a small business. Lots of small businesses provide great service. So it's likely you've got some. Make sure they're on your website or on an email signature, or you've got them in a portfolio to show potential customers you're sitting down with to talk about possibilities of working together. And then you can use testimonials very nicely on social media. LinkedIn actually has a recommendation structure, which makes it really easy to give and receive recommendations. And the follow-up activity is to think about how you could formalize a customer recommendation scheme. So it's important to think about it because you want to reward people for referring you because it's a lovely thing to do, but you don't want to reward them in such a way that it looks large enough to be a bribe. So getting that balance right is quite important. And then you can easily set up Google reviews or TripAdvisor reviews if you're a service business, which will again help you to get the word of mouth marketing out to a bigger audience. Tip 7 is also about making your marketing budget go a long way, and it's farming versus hunting. And if it's not a phrase you're familiar with, farming is essentially getting more business out of your existing customers. So either getting them to spend more with you each time they buy from you, or to increase the frequency of when they buy from you, or ideally both. So it's encouraging and promoting referrals from your existing customers. That's farming. And hunting is finding new customers. And hunting is much more expensive, both in terms of your time and in terms of resources you'll need to do it. So concentrate on farming first because that's most cost effective, but don't neglect the hunting. And then it's a good idea to set targets and plans for your business. So most people have a business plan and they want to grow their business, but actually breaking that down into how many new customers you need, perhaps how many you typically get out of referral and word of mouth, and then how many you have to generate from your marketing activity. And don't forget, if you lose some, you need to account for the attrition. You need to replace those as well. So the quick ideas on farming versus hunting. The first one is around farming. So if you just take a simple Excel spreadsheet, for example, you can map each customer against the products or services they buy from you. And quite often, reviewing that data will reveal some patterns or some trends. It might be that a lot of people don't buy a particular product or service, or it might be that you're just not educating your customers about what else you do. And it's the saddest thing in the world when you sit down with a good customer and they explain that they've gone elsewhere for something that you make or you provide just because they didn't know that you did it. So it happens, but it shouldn't happen if you're doing your farming correctly. And then another fairly quick exercise to do is look at your past sales record and look at where that business came from, the lead source. So it might have been through your website, it might have been through a direct contact at networking, it might be through somebody who found you on social media or Facebook or LinkedIn, for example, an exhibition or a referral. And identify which of those sources are good for you because you might be able to do more of that, and don't worry so much on the others. To make things more formal, you can follow up with a loyalty scheme, or you might want to set out a whole new business plan. But don't forget that a healthy business will develop more than one source. The richer the variety of sources you have for new business coming in, the safer your business is. So think about what you can do to make each of those lead sources work for you or work better for you. Tip 8 is social media. Sadly, many people still feel completely confused or left out of the social media scene. Sometimes they're frightened of it, but it is just another way of getting your message across. And I tend to think of it as a digital way of networking rather than a face-to-face way of networking. But it needs consideration to find the right media for your business and the right message that fits with your conventional media message. So the top channels for social media are LinkedIn, especially for business and B2B, Facebook, particularly the company pages. Twitter is good for both B2B and B2C, but it's also used extensively by journalists. So it's good for PR and good for contacting journalists and talking to them. And YouTube is increasingly important. And there are literally hundreds of others, some of which might be very good for your business, but don't try and do them all. It's better to do one or two really well than try and spread your efforts across too many platforms and not make an impact on any of them. So review the choices you make against your target customers. So when and where do your target customers hang out? Those are the ones you really want to work hard at. And the other thing about social media is it is very different to conventional media. It's all about content that's informative, about content that's newsworthy, and of course you want it to be interactive. So you'll want people to talk to you on those platforms, and you'll need to allow time in your budget, not necessarily money, but time, to respond to them and talk to them and make sure that it's a two-way conversation and you're not simply setting your business to transmit mode. Different platforms can require tailoring, but you might be able to adapt content that works well for you from one to another without too much effort. But some platforms really do need expert design. And to work well, social media has to be done on a regular basis. The worst thing you can do is be very active for a couple of months because you're really enthusiastic and then give up, because that's very noticeable to the outside world. So you're better to do a little bit regularly and build it up gradually than to have a huge effort and then stop or cut back. And it will take time to work for you, so bear with it. So our immediate ideas on social media is just to review the platforms you're on. Make sure you're not spreading your efforts too thinly so that they are effective. You might have somebody who's already expert at a platform or already in your business, and it's perfectly okay to delegate the work to them in terms of posting and managing the account and responding to people. But make sure if you're the business owner and you're not doing your own social media, that you are setting the strategy and you are approving things before they go out. Don't just say, there you go, and let them go. You are responsible for setting the strategy and for monitoring the content. So yes, ask for ideas. It's great if you have somebody who's willing to take that on, but don't just let them get on with it, and make sure they're doing it the way that you want it done. And you should, if you've got staff, you should definitely have a social media policy, and you should explain it to all your staff. So recently I did a training day with a Herefordshire company. They had about 30 staff in the room, and in fact the most beneficial part of the training for them was an opportunity to ask questions, because they all have questions and concerns about social media, particularly given the recent problems about data and data sharing. So there are a lot of concerns about social media, and it's good to have an open conversation with your staff about that. Make sure they know what the do's and don'ts are. Tip 9 is an extension of word of mouth, and that's more formal collaboration between businesses. This is another great way to promote your business if you find another trusted business or people who are able and happy to recommend you and your products. But just be a little bit careful now that we've got GDPR coming in. For example, I would never advocate sharing a database. So it's all right to get people to collaborate with you, promote your business, but don't share databases. That really is a no-no. So for tips on collaboration, some things you can do quite easily is review where you go networking. So either online or face-to-face networking, and make sure, check, are you building effective strategic alliances? Are you meeting the right partners who have similar industries, complementary products and services, and are you progressing those? Sometimes it takes a long time to build up trust like this with another business, so you might have to think about more long-term than short-term results here. But just thinking generally about what businesses you could partner with will help you when you've got a series of people to see. You might be 30 people at a meeting and you haven't got time to see all of them. You might be able to prioritise who you should be talking to and following up with. So that's our quick ideas. Targets for networking, or targets for something like using LinkedIn online for your networking. And again, have a little plan for your networking. So where you go, how often you go, what it costs you, what leads you get from it. So you identify the best groups and you don't waste too much time at the wrong ones. And a follow-up is actually to set yourself a hit list of potential partners. So even if they don't go networking, identifying them and getting in contact with them in other ways can be really effective. So make that a key part of your marketing plan, to think about potential partners. Again, each group will have an individual flavour and style, so you might find some that you really like but don't work particularly well for your business. You might have to branch out and do something that puts you a little bit more out of your comfort zone to find one that's effective for you. So there's no one size fits all on networking, but thinking about what you're doing and why you're doing it is important occasionally. Don't just do as many as you can. Tip 10 is all about managing your activity, managing your budgets. And again, this is quite a long one. It's how to set a brief for a marketing agency or an external agency, and how to evaluate their work is quite an art. So you need to have a clear idea at the outset what success looks like and what you want to achieve before you actually engage somebody. And there is a BizSmart webinar that I did a couple of years ago on how to get the most out of creative agencies. You might want to have a look at that. You certainly should have a formal written brief and instructions. And when you feedback to agencies, you should give them very structured feedback. So likes and dislikes versus the brief. So, for example, when Aardvark did a revamp of our branding and our colours, we worked with the designer, and the designer will normally give you 3 or 4 options. And we actually picked things that we liked and disliked about several of those, and we ended up with an amalgamation of each one. We didn't just pick one and adapt it. We actually said we like this with design A, but we don't like that, and we like this with design C, but we're not so keen on that. And that gives the designer much more valuable feedback to go away and come back with something you really like and really works for you. And the other thing is to be careful about quotes. Make sure you define very carefully what's included and what's excluded, and make sure your payment also means you own the copyright and you get any files handed over to you that you might need. Some agencies are quite proactive about that, others are not, but it's up to you as a customer to be proactive and manage that and make sure you know exactly what you're getting and what you're paying for. So those ideas on your managing activity is to identify a project and use a formal briefing and feedback structure. And if you haven't done that before, you probably find that you've had a bad experience at some point, and thinking about that and trying to avoid the loopholes of that will help you. But as I say, it is an art form. You might need a little bit of coaching with that. We at Aardvark do that a lot for our clients. We do a lot of project management for our clients because we understand how to get the best out of agencies. We do it a lot in our day-to-day work. But outsourcing it is an option if you feel that this is something that you don't do very often and therefore you're not expert in and you're not sure how to brief an agency. You might want to get somebody in to manage that for you. So lastly, and it's kind of an 11, but if you're on running a small business and you have a small budget, there are lots of things you can do either for very little cost or can be done for free. And I've just listed some here. So competitions are great fun and you can get some good PR out of them. Think about if you can give time instead of money. So leaflet drops are really easy, they don't cost very much. Newsletters, again, there's lots of free software out there, so that's fairly easy to do. Doing a talk or a seminar or having some information that people can download for free is good. If you can establish yourself as an expert in a particular field, that will bring you business. Make sure you're adding fairly regularly to your website. So if you have a content management program, you will be doing that, but it's really good for SEO and for your Google ranking to add content regularly to your website. Don't leave it for several years, it will look outdated. Quite often charity working or community support, again, you're exchanging your time for a little bit of publicity and you're adding something back to your communities, which is also a great satisfying thing to do. And thinking about what's newsworthy from a PR point of view. PR is great if you can do it and can work really effectively, but it does need just a little bit of thought. So once you've worked through all those tips, think about your priorities in terms of short-term and longer-term. And you want to do the high-impact things. So strategic priorities that are going to have a high impact might need a bit of thought, might be hard to implement. But there might be things that will have a high impact and really easy to do. So do those first. Underneath at the bottom, the low impact, if they're nice to do and you've got time, that's fine. But some things will have a low impact and are hard to do, and just cross those off. Don't even go there. So you give yourself a hit list of things to do gradually in your business. So if you're following those top 10 tips, you will have worked on each of these building blocks, which hopefully will make sure your marketing is much more effective and efficient for you. And don't forget, you can get grant funding help with a lot of this. So thanks for listening.
Great. Thank you very much, Jill, for hosting today's webinar. I will be sending out a copy of the presentation and Jill's contact details out to you very shortly, so please do email Jill direct if you have any questions. So before we close our webinar today, just a quick reminder, if you would like to keep up to date on our latest webinars, please make sure you follow us on SlideShare or subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also access all of our resources for business owners by downloading the BizSmart app. That's the end of today's BizSmart webinar. Thank you all for listening. Thank you again, Jill, and we hope you can join us again soon.